For this lesson, we're going to look at different ways to filter, sort, and manipulate a pivot table. We're going to work with the tab, Manipulate the Pivot Table. This is a very simple pivot table based on the Realty database. It'll start as a one-level pivot based on state, displaying the number of properties as the value. And we'll expand on it a little bit in this lesson as we learn how to do more filtering and manipulation of the pivot table. First thing we're going to do is talk about expanding and collapsing fields. And up to this point, we've mostly dealt with pivot tables that just have one value on the row and one column. Our pivot table on the right now has state as row labels. So let's add city to the row labels underneath. Click on the pivot table and bring up the builder. And now let's just drag state, or drag city underneath state. And as you notice now, when I did that, when I put city there, all of my states got arrows next to them. We covered this a little bit in a previous lesson, but now what we can do is we can expand each of those. I could right click on it and go to Group and Outline and Show Detail, and that will show everything underneath each state. Similarly, if I've got it expanded, I can right click, go to Group and Outline, and I can hide detail. Now these little arrows will let me expand each state individually. So I can click on the arrow next to Arizona and I can toggle it back and it will show me what cities are in Arizona that we have properties in. I can also just double click on the actual state entry. It will act like a toggle in expanding and contracting. Incidentally, when we talk about expanding and contracting a row, the term for that is actually drilling. So when you double click on a state, you're drilling down into the data to see what is beneath it, to see what's underneath that number. So if I look at South Carolina, I have 63 properties. I want to drill down into South Carolina to see where all the properties lie in which cities. Now, because we said that we could double click on a state heading, or we could use the arrows, I'd just like to point out that at the end of the pivot table tab, we've got a button that says View Triangles, and we can turn those triangles on or off, but even if they're off, we can still drill down by double clicking on that row header. So now let's talk about sorting a field. Basic sorting works the same way it does in a regular Excel table or list. Just click on the column you want to sort and click on the A to Z button or Z to A, and it will sort. Now another interesting thing, you can apply this to a subfield as well. So I can go down here to North Carolina, and now I can click into North Carolina and I can do my sort Z to A or A to Z. I can manually sort that. One other interesting thing you can do with sorting is that we've sorted by North Carolina and then by all the cities in North Carolina. What if we want to sort by the actual value? Well, you can do that too. Just by clicking in the value area, I can click highest to lowest. So now I see that Charlotte has the most properties, then Concord, then Statesville, and Gastonia. Or I can go from 1 all the way up to the highest number of properties just by clicking in the actual value area. And you see how it doesn't change the sort order of the states. You're sorting within the level that you're in. Well, now that we've figured out how to sort our pivot table 6 ways to Sunday, I'm going to go ahead and put my triangles back on and I'll collapse everything. What we want to do is get into some more interesting filtering. So right now I've got everything collapsed up to state. And I'm going to click down the drop-down label on the row headers, and it pulls up state for me. Now you see up top here it's saying select field. Which field do you want to sort on? State. We could go and choose city from here as well. Do we want to sort it ascendingly or descendingly? We can change the sort there. We want to filter by the label. We can say if it's equal to, we'll get into this in a second. Or down below, we can actually filter by individual values. And we've actually explored this a little by seeing how clicking the select all will toggle everything on or off. So if you just want 1 or 2 states, a quick way is to turn them all off, then go down and pick the state you want. Maybe we want to see North Carolina and South Carolina. So let's click on SC and NC. So we're just filtering by 2 values now. Now let's explore these filter by boxes a little bit more. I'm going to go up here and do a select all and ensure that this is sorted the right way. Now it's pretty easy just to filter by values here because they're all pretty discrete. But if you had a large set of data and you wanted to, for for example, get everything that started with an N. What would be a quick way to do that? If I click on my sort and get that to come up again, I can go to my filter by label, say choose one. It gives me a lot of different options to filter on that label. Equals, does not equal. That's the same as clicking the checkbox down there. How about begins with or does not begin with? So if I want to search every state that started with the letter N, I could just type that N there. And now I've got New York and North Carolina. What about M? What M states do I have? MI and MN. And you can have that, you can have as many characters as you want there because you're saying begins with. So when I do MN, it's every state that begins with MN. So if you go back and look at those label options again, you'll see we have a lot of different options. Contains, does not contain, is greater than equal to, or between. The value filter works now. Let's go ahead and just turn this one off. So we'll go to choose one, and then go down to the by value. What if we want to see all the states that have 4 property listings? We can say by value is equal to 4. Now it shows me all the states that have exactly 4 properties. That's kind of good. It doesn't really make sense for what we're doing. So what if we wanted to say all the states that are greater than 100 listings? We just have 1, North Carolina. What about greater than 50? We've got 2, North Carolina and South Carolina. So we could also do greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, between, and then we have a top or a bottom 20. So what if we want to see the top 5 states? Click the top 10 first. I know it says top 10, but that just opens up that possibility for a top report. So we're doing a top 10 filter on values. And right now it's saying we're doing the top 0 items. What if we want to do the top 10? Click that. I've got the top 10 items now. This is going to be ascendingly, so it's from 1 down to 4, the number of properties. So what if I wanted to show the bottom 10? I could key in that too. And there I get the ones with the most values because they've got 770, 63. It's also the bottom. I could go for 5 though. I'm going to choose the bottom 5. Now wait a minute, here's a problem. We said 5, but Excel brought us back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here's a little nuance you're going to have to really understand in working with Excel. Let me filter that and sort that by. Okay, so we wanted to see the bottom 5. So that should give us 5 entries. But look what happens here. The bottom one is this one. The second to the bottom is South Carolina. Third to the bottom is Arizona. Fourth to the bottom is Georgia. Now, the next 5 properties have the same number of properties in their state. They all have 4. So it's essentially a tie. And in this case, when it's a tie, there's no way to determine which ones is more desirable. So even though we have a bottom 5 report, because the 5th entry was actually a tie, it's showing all of them. Okay, so it's a little nuance you have to be aware of, but I don't think you'd want Excel to arbitrarily just pick one. So we looked at the top and bottom. Let's see a couple other options for that. So instead of the top 10 items or the bottom 10 items, we could choose the bottom 10 and instead of items, percent. And that's just going to be North Carolina. What about the top 10%? Now we get the top 10% of the properties in our database. So you see, basic pivot tables are very powerful tools for displaying and aggregating data all on their own. And once you become skilled at manipulating pivot tables by organizing the fields and values, applying filters and sorting, you'll really be able to use pivot tables to effectively report on large sets of data.